Hi everyone, welcome to week 6 of your Pharmacy Procedures 2 course. This week we're going to be covering both chapters 18 and 19. As we get started with chapter 18, I want you to notice that they talk about two different types of infusions. The first is the electronic infusion, and this is what most healthcare facilities are going to be using nowadays. And we'll talk about specific calculations with these in the next chapter. But this is what most facilities are using nowadays, so this is where we're going to focus most of our attention. Everything is programmed in the actual electronic device, and I've got you a picture of one right here. And everything is programmed by milliliters per hour. Now, back in what you might call the old days, or in some of the smaller facilities, you may still see IVs being used with a set that's not an electronic set. It's a manual set. And this is a picture of the manual set with some of the different pieces labeled. The idea with this is that you're able to regulate how much fluid is being administered to the patient using the tubing and some of these different pieces within it. So you can actually, change the, use the roller clamp to clamp it down. You can change the drip rate, by putting different drip rate tubes on there, things like that. So the big thing here is that these are not used very frequently anymore, but they are going to show you in this chapter the different ways to calculate using drip rates. Now, we have basically a couple different types of tubing. We have what's called macro and micro. Micro is 60 drops per mil, so that's really, really small. Whereas macro can be calibrated differently. So it can be 10, it can be 15, it can be 20. And you have to make sure that you check the packaging to know how it's actually being calibrated. And then once you know that information, you're going to use that to calculate flow rates. So when we talk about a flow rate using a manual set, it's always in drops per minute, and it can kind of vary a little bit because this is a more manual process, and a lot of times it just depends on how and when you round. So the best thing that I can tell you is don't round until the very end. So never round until you get to the very end of the problem. Now, your book is going to show you a couple of different ways to do these problems. They're going to show you ratio and proportion. They're going to also show you dimensional analysis. And finally, they're going to show you the formula method. And honestly, the formula method, I think, is the easiest way to do it. So that's the one that I'm going to show you guys today. The formula method is using this particular formula. So anytime we're calculating flow rate, we have to have the volume that we're going to infuse in milliliters. We're going to have the drop factor, which is what this is, the set calibration. So what does it say on the packaging, okay? And then our time to infuse goes on the bottom. And the key with this formula is to make sure our time is in minutes. So if we're given a time of 3 hours, we're going to multiply it by 60 to change it to minutes. So we really want to make sure that we are, changing our time to minutes before we use this formula. So I personally prefer this one, but it's totally, again, totally up to you which one you use. So it's up to you. So we're going to go ahead then and move on to chapter 19 because, like I said, chapter 19 is more about those infusions using the electronic systems, which is more commonplace in our facilities. The whole idea behind calculating infusion times in this chapter is because we need to know when to have that next IV bag ready, or we need to know when to stop the IV bag, because most of the time what's going to happen is the physician's going to order it over a certain period of time. So we want to know when to turn it off, when to start up a new one, or when to have another one prepared. So the calculating IV times is going to be key. In order to calculate an IV time, we're going to use, again, a simple formula. And that formula is to divide the volume by the rate in milliliters per hour. So we want the volume to be in milliliters, and we're going to divide by the rate in milliliters per hour. And here's an example for you. if we want to calculate the infusion time for an IV that contains 1,000 milliliters, we're going to infuse it at 1,000 or 100 milliliters per hour. What's the time? So it's volume divided by rate is going to equal time. So in this case, 1,000 divided by 100 gives me 10. So that means this particular IV bag is going to last 10 hours. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. The one thing that you do want to keep in mind is that sometimes the time that we're given is, we might need to calculate it and change it into minutes. So if you need to change your, a partial hour, a fractional hour into minutes, here's an example for you. You're going to take that fractional part, that 0.67, and multiply it by 60. That's how you change that fractional part to minutes. You just take it times 60. And you also want to make sure that when you're calculating what time something's going to be completed, that you know what the facility is using. Are we using standard time or are we using military time? Most of our facilities do use military time. So if you're not familiar with military time, we do cover that in this chapter. But military time is based on a 24-hour clock. So if you have any trouble at all with understanding military time, please make sure you reach out to me, as well as any other topics that are covered in these two chapters. You can always email, call, or text. And as always, my number is 618-792-2293. Have a great week.